Welcome back to the Donkey Vote podcast with Francis.
Tobias.
And George. These interviews will be focusing on the past careers of politicians before they entered parliament.
With a strong intention to our audience that anything is achievable no matter what you studied in university or college.
If you like this sort of content, please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. Also, we are on YouTube and Spotify, so make sure you follow us on those platforms.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram as well to keep updated with the latest episodes and reels that we release.
Enjoy
the interview.
Today, we're going to be interviewing actually the newest elected member to the Victorian Parliament, the member for the North East Metropolitan Region, Richard Welch. Richard, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on the Donkey Vote. It's a privilege to be here.
Just before we start our questions for you, Richard, could you give us a little brief description of yourself, just for our audience out there who may not know an entire lot about you?
Sure, I'm 56 years old.
You don't look 56.
Thank you. I grew up in the country, but I spent a lot of the last 20 years I spent overseas working in the UK and in India in particular, where I had a company of my own and I did manufacturing in India. So I come from that sort of business background, a lot in technology, innovation space, but I've also had the privilege of employing people and being responsible as a someone accountable to stakeholders and to investors to deliver something. And I came back to Australia, brought my family back to Australia in 2019.
Oh.
And at that point in time in my life, having gone through a bit of an entrepreneurial journey, I had a choice of what do I do next, which could have been to start a new business, something, but I really thought perhaps now, because of the journey I'd been through, I've got some life experience that maybe I can put to use to the community, and that's when I started to get involved in politics then.
So you didn't really have that you weren't really enticed in politics previously before you came to Australia?
No, I have no political pedigree whatsoever. You know what I was very good at dinner table conversations and debates where I had every solution to every problem in the world. So, that was another motivation to say, it's like if you talk a good game, perhaps then you should put your head above the parapet and actually go and do something about it, not just talk about it.
Did some of those dinner chats include like solving world hunger or those sort of big issues? Or
it didn't do the beauty parades, we all need world peace. I guess because of my background, the things that I was engaged in, I naturally gravitated to, this affects me as a business, or this is what stops me importing or exporting, or seeing the example of India, for example. If I was working immersed in India and seeing the way India's going about developing their nation, educating their young people, their whole attitude to ambition and achievement, those things were really, so they sort of filtered through to, when I come to Australia and I look at Australia and, the first impressions when you've been away for a while, you look with fresh eyes. So I saw, the contrast was quite marked in terms of the level of aspiration or desire or hunger. So those sort of things sort of float through. So if we're talking about foreign trade, or we're talking about the right conditions for business to succeed, or we're talking about education, or we're talking about why aren't we more ambitious? Why aren't we doing what other countries do? That's sort of how it sort of bubbles up for me.
Okay. We'll get then straight into our questions for you, Richard. So our first question to you is, how was your high school and university life? And do you have any specific memorable moments you'd like to share?
High school, I grew up in the country, so I went to school, Leongatha High School and Warrigal High Schools. And so my high school era was from 1980 to 85. And I've always maintained the education I got in those country schools was as good as any private school in Australia. I got an excellent education in those country schools. Good teachers, we had fantastic facilities, massive playing fields and things like that, the right ratio of teachers to students, but also the schools weren't too big. So in my case, the schools were somewhere between 300 and 500 kids, but that meant that it was never impersonal. Mm-hmm. You weren't just in your year group didn't have 600 people.
Not like our year group.
Yeah. And I feel bad about kids these days, because I think the relationship I had with my school was and between year levels was much more personal, because it wasn't so big. And I'd like to see us come back to it. So I had a great really great grounding, I think, from my high school education. Did I have any memorable moments? Well, I had, I love sports. I played a lot of cricket. I was a very enthusiastic footballer, but not a very good one. I could take a good mark, but I couldn't. I couldn't kick. I was a very inaccurate kick. I can remember taking a great catch in cricket. I relive to this day.
Was this for your high school team as well?
Yeah, no. And I remember taking a really good mark on someone's shoulders where I was flying into the air, and I relived that one. Yeah, that was my big moment. I was school captain, which was sort of nice to get to, and I was boys athletics champion as well. So I love the sport. And I think that's the part of it had the right balance. We did a bit of sport. It was always sport plentiful at your fingertips, as much as you wanted. And there was really strong academics. So I think, if I could digress, one of the big pivot points for me was when I had to change schools. So in year 10, I went from Leongatha High to Warragul High, which are two schools within Gippsland. So you wouldn't think it was very much of a big change, but for me it was catastrophic in a way that I grew up a country boy, and that little town was my entire universe, and all my brothers and sisters preceding me had gone from kindergarten full through to uni from that house, from Leongatha. So for me it was a real wrench, and I think it did ultimately had changed my worldview, that for a lot of the rest of my life I've always felt a little bit of an outsider as a result. And maybe that's what's driven me to do a few things I've done, because I didn't feel like part of the mainstream. I wanted to do something more than the mainstream or above the mainstream, because I think because I didn't handle that as a young 15 or 14-year-old, that sort of made me a little bit driven after that.
Okay. So how if you don't mind sharing the podcast, what made you move from Leongatha High School to Warragul?
Simply my dad changed jobs,
okay.
and he moved, so we moved. Yeah, basically, that's simple as that. Really.
Okay. And then you became school captain at Warragul High. After 2 years, that's pretty impressive as well.
The secret to that, and this is my advice to anyone else who wants to be school captain: be in the school play.
In the school.
I was the lead actor in the school play the year before, and name recognition.
Everyone just knew you were at school, Richard. Richard's such a great actor.
We know that guy, so we'll vote for him. That's my theory anyway.
Okay. So, so would you advise for a lot of students out there maybe to go for school captain, that sort of thing, and try and go for leadership within schools, or?
Yes or no? I think it gives you some experiences. I think it's going through the process of it is almost more valuable than the outcome, because the school captain is a really good thing, and I respect school captains, but it's the process is probably as important, that you put yourself forward, and you put yourself in the moment and be on the spot for something. That's the power of it. But that's not. But you can do that in other ways too. You can be on the spot because you choose to be the opening batsman, or you choose to be, goal attack in netball, because you choose to put yourself in the moment. So different people have different strengths.
Yeah.
So some have academic strengths, so they go to the debating team and be in the moment that way. Some have athletic skills, so they're in the moment. Some have leadership skills, so put yourself in the moment, and it's all part of that journey.
I guess it's just, every single person has a different, skills and mindset. So do whatever I guess is best for you, and what you want to do and what you enjoy. Don't be forced to seek a prestigious position just because it's prestigious.
Yeah.
Always go for something that you want to do.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. We'll move on to our second question for you, Richard. So Tobias.
Yeah. What are the issues you would like to focus on in your political career?
I've got a reasonable shopping list.
Enough to fill a whole grocery bag, or?
Easily. And I guess you've got to discipline yourself, because you can't do everything everywhere and be everything to everyone. So I've put them in sort of a hierarchy of, the main ones, and then ones that
like the bread and milk, and then all the way down to the
ones that are more like hobbies.
Yeah.
But there's no, if the opportunity presents, the hobby one could suddenly become a profession, right? if the opportunity presents itself. So the really important ones to me, firstly around business, unsurprisingly, that as a liberal, I absolutely believe in the free market. I believe the free market has actually solved so many of the world's problems. If you look at the statistics on world hunger and infant mortality and etc., the economic solution to those has been capitalism. So to refer that locally means I really wanted businesses to thrive in Victoria. And what are the conditions that enables them to thrive? So I know from personal experiences, I know exactly how government can help or hinder the ability for business people to get on and create wealth, to employ people, to innovate and give us new products or find new solutions for things. So I'm always interested in business policy. I have become increasingly interested in energy.
Okay.
And that's sort of because I'm interested in business. We cannot have successful business in manufacturing if we don't have successful or a reliable, cheap energy.
Yeah.
So almost by necessity, I've sort of, okay, I have to be interested in that as well. And anyone who's interested in energy would, I think, then have to have the conversation about nuclear energy in particular. You have to be interested in nuclear because that's the only zero emission baseload that can buffer up the renewables. So I'm interested in energy, and then two in my like more hobby ones, education reform and local government reform in particular. I think there's a whole discussion around local government that we're only at the superficial level of. You know, the community are very unhappy that local councils aren't focusing on what they think are important, you know, roads and rubbish collection and graffiti and local services. But I think there's a whole nother discussion to be had about the level of lack of democracy in local government and the growth of the bureaucracy and the power of the bureaucracy, where it's now this sort of internal ecosystem where you work at this council for 3 or 4 years, then you work for another council. And how that, I think that's quite toxic to local civic life.
Yeah, because you know, local communities especially, you know, they need local sort of, you know, councillors and that sort of thing supporting the community. And you know, if you've got people just moving around council to council trying to, you know, impact and trying to just gain political mileage and, you know, political gain, it's not good for the people at all.
And ultimately, it means no one's ever really accountable. The figurehead elected councillors are sort of accountable, but they're sort of accountable for this group of bureaucrats who are never accountable because they either can't, you know, they just move. If things are, you know, 2-3 years here, go 2-3 years there, there's no legacy that they're accountable for in what they do.
Exactly, you know, once a, you know, scandal comes along, they'll just move councils and, you know, just move away and not face the consequences of their actions. Which
is not to say there are many very good council workers out there, very dedicated council workers out there. I think the system is actually what means we don't get the best result for them or for the public. So I think it's the system that we need to look at so that it's more transparent, more able for democratically elected people to direct what happens rather than unelected CEOs to direct what happens.
And just to go back to your point on education reform as well, I know since you said previously, you know, you've come from a regional area and going to regional high schools. I know a lot of problems now with regional schooling is, you know, there's not enough teachers and there's not enough teachers there to support students. I know there's schools there, probably 200, 300 students, but only, you know, a handful of teachers. So what ways do you think the government should improve on in terms of supporting regional education?
That is a tricky one because it's like doctors as well. We have problems getting doctors out to regions. We have problems getting businesses out to regions. So probably the solution to one is probably the solution to many, is that the incentive to go and live in the country, it will attract a certain number of people because a certain number of people like the lifestyle of a country town. But the other real big impediments are there's no wider jobs out there. So if someone goes and works as a teacher in a country town, their spouse or their partner probably won't be able to get a job. Their kid or their family won't have the same economic opportunities they do, and there won't be the variety of things that they know are available in the city. So some of the solutions are making sure that we either decentralise some of our government so that there's more things to do, more economic investment, that we put incentives for businesses to grow, to go and build out there. But you know, the real long-term one that people have discussed for years and years, but yet we never seem to get around to is more high-speed rail to regional centres as well, so that we can start to spread out economic development from being just a city phenomenon as well.
Yeah, I think that entirely, high-speed rail into regional areas is so important because, the urban sprawl of Melbourne at one stage, it's going to get, 60 to 70 kilometers out. And I think in general, it's a mega city at that point. And, I think in my opinion, that, we should be investing more in, high-speed rail towards, towns like Ballarat, Bendigo, your Warragul's as you're from previously, Richard, Shepparton, those sort of towns. Especially because they need employment, they need people there. If you have high speed rail, if you put incentives there for businesses to set up and move sort of offices and that sort of thing to those areas, it's not only going to take the strain off the CBD in Melbourne, which is already beginning to get a little bit overcrowded, but it's also going to support these country towns, which are crying out for people to move there and and for businesses to be set up in these towns.
And I think it also it has another value because we talk about population growth and we simultaneously talk about the housing crisis as well. And there are different ways to address the housing crisis. More supply is the usual answer, but within that, so let's talk about supply of that. Supply is you either build more houses that have space for families or you put them in tower blocks. Mm-hmm. Now, I recognise that housing density is part of the solution in the city for that growing, but I really strongly don't think it can be the entire solution.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that is it's not the right environment for families, right?
Yeah.
So I grew up, I don't know how you grew up, but I grew up in an era where a backyard and a front yard and a small school and sports facilities were readily available. And I call that a technology, right? People wouldn't think of that as a technology, but I think that's a social technology that provides for stable families, helps produce stable families and helps produce good citizens because you're invested in your area. Putting people in tower blocks is a different kind of social technology. And I'm really proud to say that within a generation, we will profoundly regret reorganising our society into tower blocks.
Yeah.
So the only way we can have our cake and eat it too, that is have population growth and the right social technology, is to develop the regions where you've got space to grow.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not against some densification, but if it becomes the entire solution, it's like I think that's a really bad choice.
Yeah.
Bad choice.
I think as well because if you have a child growing up in as you said, an apartment block, and there's not much readily available, green space, and as you said, there's not much available in terms of sporting facilities and that sort of thing. That can be really detrimental towards the child's development. And going to inner city schools, especially, I know a lot of these inner city schools, they're very tight and cramped, and there's not much space out there to play outside, play football, cricket, those sort of sports, and that's very detrimental towards a child's health and their well-being growing up. And we are probably starting to see that now for us, we grew up in Point Cook in the outer suburbs, so we still have front lawn, back lawn, that sort of thing, and that sort of housing.
Yeah.
But closer you get to the city, nowadays 10, 15 kilometers out, you're starting to get a lot of apartment blocks, that sort of thing, and townhouses. And if you don't have those readily available spaces, those green spaces around the place, it can be really, really hard for young families, especially to find parks and that sort of thing too.
Well, you see, and I think you hit the nail on the head because what I saw, I spent a long time living in London, right? That they've done that, right? And I saw the consequence. The consequence is nothing is ever spontaneous anymore. You just can't spontaneously go out and kick a ball, have a run. You can't do anything because they've built it in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So even in the schools, so when we talk about it was nice to have schools that weren't so big. Well, we've increased the capacity of those, or lots of schools, but it's almost always at the cost of playing fields and space to roam within those schools as well. So a lot of schools barely have the room for a proper athletics oval.
Yeah.
They have to go somewhere else for their athletics.
Same with us.
Yeah. That in my day, that was never the possibility, but I saw that in England. And what it meant was if you wanted to have a hit of tennis, you had to book a month in advance. If you wanted to go for a swim, you had to make a booking. So nothing was ever spontaneous. And when things cease to be spontaneous, especially for young people, it ceases to be a habit.
Yeah.
And when it ceases to be a habit, it fades out of your cultural life. when it fades out of your cultural life, then you adopt other habits instead, and they're usually not as good as the. So part of our social technology must be this concept of spontaneity, where that we've got sufficient facilities, not just to the letter of, this much space per person, but that at any time of day and night, there's a room for spontaneity to be involved in a healthy, active life.
Exactly. We'll move on now to our third question for you, Richard. Tobias, I think you did talk about this though in your preamble just before we got into the questions.
Can you talk about your career prior to politics and how was it prepared you to become a politician?
Okay. So as a country boy, like you finish school, you come to the city, as you do. And I was lucky enough that I fell into asset management with Bankers Trust and Merrill Lynch, big corporate companies. And for that stage of my life, it was awesome because it gave me really good corporate training, and I got good customer service training. I knew how to answer the phone. I knew how to deal with the public respectfully in the right way. Really good training, and got to be involved in big projects within the company. So I sort of worked my way up in those where they're dealing in big financial systems. So there's always IT projects going on.
Yeah.
Now I'm not an IT person, but I learned how to run those IT projects, which always meant understanding from the business what the business needs, and then understanding from the IT or the developers how they might deliver that, and sort of being that translator in the middle, and then keeping the whole thing on track somehow and managing. So that actually was a really good training for anyone who wanted to ultimately go into business. Mm-hmm. So I did those projects, and those projects progressively got larger and larger. So they ended up sending me over, this was Merrill Lynch, sent me over to the UK to run some projects there in Europe. So in Luxembourg and Brussels and Madrid, and later on in New York, etc. Where I was dealing in like $400 million projects, and having to do significant things about people's employment and other sort of stuff. So, which was fine and adventurous for a little while, but you do realise you're just a cog in a very big machine when you're an employee of a big corporate. And I got a bit of a hunger that I want to maybe control the gears myself, be in charge of the steering wheel myself. So I did, the way to tool myself up, I did an MBA at Imperial College in London, and which gave me I had a lot of real world experience, but I didn't have some of that academic toolkit of how to do things the correct way. Marketing and accounting and financial documents and these sort of things. So as part of that MBA, one of the electives I had to choose, one of them was entrepreneurship. And that was one of those exercises where your group of friends get round together and you make an imaginary business, and you write an imaginary business plan for that, and then you pitch for imaginary capital as an academic exercise. And I came up with a concept for some motion tracking technology as part of that. And luckily I had the other guys around me were very smart, and we came up with a way we could monetize that concept as well in our business plan. And we did the exercise and we won the competition. It was great. And at that point, the other guys who just did it for the academic exercise sort of said, great, thanks, goodbye. And I thought, actually, I think this idea might have some legs if I pursued it. So I patented the concept of what we did, and it was my idea after all. I hasten to add that, and then went pitched for capital to actually kick it off, and I made 100 cold calls to get people on board to help me develop it. This motion, I need sensors over here, and I need software over there, and I need some hardware over there, and I need some marketing team. So it was sort of what I'd been doing in the corporate, that translating a need into each of these business units, and how do I get them all to work as an organisation to deliver the vision of what we did. And I was able to get people to come on board on the vision and believe in what we were doing. And then the really big challenge came. We went into R&D. We tinkered. We were in a rusty RAF shed decommissioned RAF airfield, World War II airfield, which had all these old bunker sort of cells. So we rented one of those, number 45, I remember. You know, and it was leaky. There was only one light bulb. There was no toilets, and it was like, and in there we were like mad scientists tinkering, trying to invent the technology, and you know, eventually we got enough of a prototype together that I could get an investor to come in and say, okay, here where we are, here's where we want to be. Will you back us? And you know, bit by bit, I got the first investor, and then we could go a step further. Then I could go and raise some more capital and get another investor, which meant, the next one meant we could go to India and build a factory to actually produce what we were doing. And there were different reasons why we went to India. One of them was it was the only place we were dealing in electronic fabrics, which needed really fine textile skills, sewing skills. Yeah. So the only place that was actually readily available was India. So that was one of the reasons. And so I went on that next adventure of going to a foreign country and trying to, with appropriate frameworks, buy land for the company, staff the company, get people there, people who needed to be pretty good at what they did, and all on sort of on a product that hadn't even come to market yet. So it took a lot of leaps of faith of people, took a leap of faith of the investors, took a leap of faith of the employees I had in the UK, and it took certainly a leap of faith for people to leave established businesses where they were good at what they did to come and work for still effectively a startup and say, this is what we want to make. And so that whole process, because that involved finance, it involved getting permits, it involved regulation, it involved being evangelical about what you're doing, but also being able to present hard financial reports. This is the modelling of how it's going to get to where it goes. So all those multi-skills sort of, I think, were really, really important to
especially
apply.
those skills you developed from that MBA that you did as well.
Yeah, well, it applied them. Yeah, it did. And then running it. So you go from being like this hyper evangelist to, okay, now I'm sort of a semi-administrator where I've got to run the machine we've made, and then you've got to grow it. So that experience, that's my life experience, which really, I think, when you come into government or you come into parliament or you come into community service, being able to be dexterous enough that, okay, if I'm dealing with this sort of group, I know I can adapt and understand the nuances of what they need, and I go to another group, I can adapt and understand the nuances of what they need, and that provides for ability to be empathetic to people, but also provides the ability to work with them on practical, tangible solutions for what they need as well.
Yeah, because as a business owner and as a entrepreneur, you have to deal with a lot of different sort of people, different sort of ideas, and what they want to achieve within the business. And it is very similar to being a politician and being and doing community service. You're dealing with different parts of the community. They have different wants and needs, and you've got to accommodate and be able to adapt and try and be the best politician in a sense for people of your area.
The biggest difference though, like if you're a CEO, you get to talk a lot.
Yeah.
The biggest lesson you have to learn about, you get to shut up and just listen.
That's true.
You've really got to just listen. I mean, I'm doing a lot of talking now. I appreciate it, but this is a rare opportunity, so I'm going to take it.
You got to take the opportunity.
I'll take it again. But if you're dealing with the public or the community or someone with the most important is to be quiet.
Yeah.
Take in the information, however they want to present that information to you, because they'll present it to you in 100 different ways according to their own background or their experience. So being able to be patient and quiet and humble enough, I think probably humble enough to say they're giving you the information they want to give you the information. It's not for you to judge how they give it. It's for you to work out what it is they're saying, that you can do something about it.
Yeah, and for just our audience out there, I know some of people who are watching are probably interested in entrepreneurship and setting up their own companies. What sort of advice would you give them if they have an idea and they have something they want to push forward and start a company around?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, you know, whole books have been written on this question.
Yeah.
So I can't give a comprehensive answer because it's too big a question.
Yeah.
But I can give some simple homilies, as incomplete as they are. They'll be incomplete. First of all, it's the merit of just doing, and being willing to do something and keep moving forward. And I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs will say, looking back, if I knew then what I know now, I would never have dared try it. It's just dare to do. If you want a practical example of that, my lifelong habit is sit every morning and do a to-do list. And if you tick off 5 things of your 10 on that day, you've moved forward. And then the next day you write a to-do list, and that 5, then you add another 5. And if you get any 5 of those done, and if you just keep moving forward, if you task manage yourself in the early days, that's important. You've got to be absolutely sure that you ask yourselves the hardest possible questions you can ask. In that, there's the phrase magic boxes. Your plan has a magic box that you get from A to C by this magic box, but you don't actually know how you get from A to B. Hope is not a plan. Hopefully we'll do that's not hope is not a plan. So remove hope from your planning.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be okay. No, sit down, take the time to work out how.
Yeah.
How are you going to do it? And even if that how is really difficult, the fact that you've taken the time to break it down and solve that problem is something your competitor might not have done, or another entrepreneur didn't do. So the thing that differentiates you from other entrepreneurs that fail is that you're willing to take the time to break down what is necessary to do and persevere with it. You know, there's that saying, I think, start with what's necessary, do what's possible, and then soon you're doing the impossible.
Yeah.
And we had also had a theory, because we did a lot of R&D, so we had a lot of failure, lots of failure. So we had to accept the suck up that failure is part of the process. And so, do you want an anecdote on that?
Yeah, sure.
You do? We made sensors that detected when a ball impacted the sensor, so we could use part of our motion tracking. And we first of all made the basic engineering of that in the UK. We moved it over to the Indian factory to make it, and we made it in the India with these electronic fabrics sort of put into layers that we sewed up, and they became a big sensor. And we tested it in India, and it worked really good, and everything was looking great. And we thought, okay, let's get a container load of these things and ship them over to England, ready to sell. And we had hang on, before you ship the container, send one over to us so we can test it in England first. And we brought it over, and we brought it to our factory area in England, and we set it up, and we started using it in England. And within 15 minutes, the thing fell to pieces. Within 15 minutes, it literally just fell to pieces. Mm-hmm. And the reason was, we manufactured it in India, where the average temperature was around 30 degrees.
Yeah.
And we started using it in England, where at that point in time when we were testing it, it was about 15 degrees. And so all the adhesives and everything else, and all the fabrics had different malleability because of the temperature change, which we had not tested for. And so we got so we failed. So we had to send the whole container back. We had to pull apart every sensor we had made and go through all this exhaustive testing of how, at a level we hadn't assumed we needed to see how all the components behaved in different temperatures. Mm-hmm. And I guess someone who's more experienced in R&D would have said, that was you stupid, you should have done that. But we had to go through the failure cycle. And any new entrepreneur, if you're doing something that's genuinely new and there's not a precedent for you to follow, you're going to have to be willing to go through these failure cycles to learn. So the other saying we had in our factory, in our research centre, was we can achieve anything with hard work, creativity, and perseverance. And it was the perseverance that always won the day at the end of it.
Yeah. And I think that story as well is probably very true for a lot of entrepreneurs out there. So, always continue to chase your dreams and, always keep pushing, even throughout failure, even if, your ball breaks and, it's smashed after 15 minutes, you just got to keep persevering through and keep pushing, because eventually your idea will become reality.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, we'll move on now to our next question for you, Richard. So this does relate a little bit to your political career, and you ran for election in 3 different electorates, state and federally. So Yan Yean and McEwen twice.
Jagger.
Oh, Jagger as well.
In 2019.
Yeah.
McEwen in 2022, and then Yan Yean in 2022.
How did these political campaigns prepare you for your eventual election in the pre-selection contest in 2023?
They were essential preparation. So, I've taken chronologically.
Mm-hmm.
In 2019, I did my first ever campaign, my first candidate, and it was just the last 6 weeks of the election. So, it wasn't a proper campaign. I was like a last-minute candidate.
This is for Jagger as well.
For Jagger. And I knew nothing. I didn't even know what I didn't know. It was my first time in the political process ever. I didn't understand how parties work. I didn't understand anything. I came with a little bit of maybe the hubris of, I thought all my business skills would translate automatically into it. And, I found that they don't automatically. But I enjoyed the experience in that it was a learning moment. And having just come out of my 15 years doing a business, it was quite fun and liberating to do it. But politically, it was a really good apprenticeship to just get my toe in the water and say, this is how it works, and this is what I'd do differently next time.
Yeah. If
the opportunity came up again. And, we had a lot of thinking time around that period because we all got locked up in the lockdowns. No one could do much. So I had a lot of thinking time available to me about how, doing a master plan, how I'd do things differently the next time. And so when the opportunity for McEwen came up in 2021 is when the pre-selection for that was. We were still coming in and out of lockdowns at that point. I came in really armed with some ideas of how I'd go about it. And I guess I got to test those or prove those in McEwen. McEwen was a really, I loved running for McEwen because I loved the community. And they're a semi-rural community, so from my own upbringing, I sort of really identify with. But more than that, I could also identify the fact that within that seat, there were so many really specific, obvious needs that weren't being addressed for that community. So I felt sort of the same passion I felt about my business. Here's a project, here's something I can really make a difference here, and I can get people together to work on this, solving this problem. And I think that's where big electorate, different communities, different Liberal memberships across those areas, having that enthusiasm to bring people together, we're solving a problem here, meant that I got to sort of deploy the things I've learnt. Now I didn't win it, but I got a swing and I got it close, and as I was disappointed, of course, to lose naturally, but again, like a lot of things in life, you've either got to take these things as a bitter blow or as a growth opportunity. It was a growth opportunity.
We hear that all the time in school.
It was a growth opportunity. So I took a growth mindset into as I grieved for losing. As I did a lot of gardening after that. A lot of hedge clipping.
Just thinking of the face of Rob Mitchell on the hedges or something like that.
Good old Rob. Well, we'll move on. But I thought at that point maybe I will just sit back, reflect, maybe start a business or do something outside politics, just get moving again in life, and not wallow. And then I got approached to run in Yan Yean in the same year. Now, in retrospect, and the great thing about running in Yan Yean, it was a subset of McEwen. So I already knew all the issues. I knew a lot of the people in the community, and I felt really strongly about the community. So there were some really, when I was asked to run there, it was hard not to say yes, because I felt unfinished business with that community. But on another level, in a different way, a personal level and a family level, I think it was probably a mistake to run 2 campaigns in 1 year.
Yeah,
because
the taxing efforts and long campaigns, that sort of thing.
Well, it was, yeah, but I feel harder on myself than that. I feel it was sort of selfish to my family, because my kids were at an age where probably their dad had already been his focus had been elsewhere all through my career, going to India, being away for long times, and then when I brought them to Australia, and here I was off on this other project, and I probably owed to them the remainder of 2022 to be on them, and I didn't give it to them. So I do feel quite bad at a personal level that I didn't do the right thing for them. And look, they were fine. These are resilient kids, but and it wasn't as if anything terrible happened to them, except that our relationship suffered. The relationship, my duties, I felt I had neglected my duties as a father. They'll say, they may not have even noticed, but I certainly felt I'd not done the right thing. And also, I think the other political cost of running in Yan Yan, I knew that I don't think I could have run McEwen again. So I could have sat back, not done Yan Yan, and just come round and done McEwen next time.
2025.
But I think having run twice, and the voters saying, no, we're not quite ready for you, Richard, meant that McEwen wouldn't have been an option. And I thought that was probably it for me. I thought the window had opened for me to run in Jagga and McEwen, and the window closed, and now it was a good time, having learnt what I'd learnt, experienced what I experienced, to go and do something else. And so I was in the throes of doing that when North East Metro came up as an option.
And you went for it. And
I went for it.
And now you're here.
Yeah. And now I'm here. And maybe that's how it was meant to be.
Yeah, maybe
it was. So, but those 3 campaigns, certainly now, I could at least go into that pre-selection. You can compare where I was when I ran for Jagga. I know how parties work now. I know how campaigns work now. I know what is and isn't possible within politics. I know the landscape of who your stakeholders are and how you need to navigate that stuff. So now actually I feel, in a way, maybe this was the best possible outcome, even though I didn't know that at the time. That I can do the most good, I can help the most people, I can support the community the best way now, because I've got the life experience and the political experience that I can bring to bear.
Yeah, and that's the whole job of it as an MP.
Yeah,
just representing the whole community and doing the best for your community, as we said before. So
yeah,
I'm greatly appreciate that you're doing that right now, Richard, for your community.
It's my honour.
Yeah, we'll move on to our next question for you, Richard. So, who would you say is your political role model or idol?
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it?
It's always a tough one.
I would have to say that I think if we said influence and therefore role model, I'd say it'd have to be my father, who was a school teacher. But it was, there are many aspects about him that influenced me today. But the relevant one is, my dad didn't compartmentalize his values. So he was a school teacher here. He sort of did school council there. He was a committed Christian who went to church every Sunday there. He was involved in Rotary. He was.
So, as you were saying, Richard.
He didn't compartmentalize his life. So the values he had, he was the same in each walk of life that he was going through, and therefore was true to himself and true to his values. And that was sometimes convenient and sometimes not very convenient for someone to stick to what they believe. So that, and there's a great example. He started to get the newspaper delivered to our house. Okay, but he hadn't organised it and he wasn't paying for it. And so some people, not you, not me, some people would have just let the newspaper keep going, right? Because suddenly you're getting newspaper delivered for free. He, on his honour, took himself up to the newsagent and said, no, I'm getting this for free, you need to change it, and here's the money for all the newspapers I got. So it's just that sense of honour and integrity that he had, not just in the big things, but in the really little things. That's what's influenced me. You know, if you can be honourable in the little things, you can be honourable in the big things. And then politically, I guess the biggest influence, you have the era. My formative years, in teenage years, I had the examples of John Howard and Jeff Kennett. John Howard, as someone who served a very long apprenticeship before they became Prime Minister, and learnt to moderate their views, to broaden their views, and be able to lead a very harmonious and bring a community with him on difficult things. I think he's a really fascinating model of someone maturing into a role and then mastering it. And Jeff Kennett, because of the same reason everyone else do, don't we all love someone who comes in and does something decisive?
Yeah.
And pushes aside the noise and says, here's the problem, here's the solution, let's go for it. So I think we all love that idea, and we will probably tend to romanticize that idea. And certainly to this day, Labor try to whip us about some of those hard decisions he made and forced through. But
they were necessary at the time. They had to
everybody's forgotten how dire the situation was back then. How dare you close the school? How dare you privatise it? How dare you? No. I mean, if you'd lived through that era, you would understand. We were in a very, very bad place, and if it hadn't been for him, all the prosperity we've enjoyed since then are the results of the reforms and the change of mindset the state needed, really, at that point to crawl out of that hole. So I really, the decisiveness, and I think that appeals to me as an entrepreneur as well, go get it.
Yeah.
Go get it.
And I guess now we're kind of in a similar situation back to then, with massive levels of debt and that sort of thing within the state government. So
yeah,
those sort of tough decisions sadly could be coming across in the next couple of years if it continues the way we're going.
Yeah, I think the strange thing to me is the only difference, like economically, it's very similar territory. It is the same territory. The difference I noticed that back then, 92, the wider Victorian community's appreciation of how bad it was everyone understood it. That's why it was such a landslide. Right now, the difference is I don't think the community understand the gravity of where we're at, and I sort of love to ruminate on why is that. Is it cultural difference? Is it because the norms are, because we've borrowed so much, we're living in this fantasy land where no one's feeling the pain yet, or or there are more bread and circuses going on. The big build is one big bread and circus exercise to distract us from our situation. So the difference is that making the case of the seriousness, the gravity of our situation is a harder job this time than it was back then. But the pain and the gravity is the same. Will be the same.
Will be the same
if we don't correct it.
Yeah, and we need politicians like yourself, Richard, to try and push the government towards recognizing these sort of faults, and we don't want a repeat of what happened 30, 40 years ago.
No, you're the wrong question, because they're not going to recognise it. They are never going to recognise it. And I think there are a lot of people around them who, it's an article of faith now to believe that this can go on forever like this. But to your point, we've got to prove we're competent to be the alternative. In 92, I think we presented ourselves very well as the competent alternative. We're still building up to that. I think the moment we make that clear to the community, everything will change at that point. Once the community's got someone to cling on to take the hand with, if we can take the hand with the community on this, I think that is the end of the Labor government here. We've got 2 years to do it.
Yeah. We'll see how
We'll
we
see.
Yeah. We'll move on now to our second last question for you, Richard.
Yeah.
This talks a little bit about why you joined the party and what made you run in the 2023 pre-selection.
What made you run the 2023 pre-selection contest for the Liberal Party in the North East Metro region? What made you join the Liberal Party also?
I'll answer the second one first.
Yeah.
If I may, why I joined the Liberal Party. So technically speaking, when I came back to Australia, I could have joined any party really. I wanted to be involved in politics. I wanted to help the community, and what would be the best vehicle for me to do that with. So yeah, theoretically, I could have chosen any party, but at the end of the day, if you join the Greens or the Labor Party, the fact is there are a set of prescribed beliefs you must have. You must believe this about X, Y, Z. You must believe that. There is no flexibility, no intellectual flexibility, no moral or values-based flexibility at all. And on the other hand, what we value as Liberals is the freedom of thought and freedom to have the best way to run society is give individuals the right to be individuals and have as many thoughts and ideas as possible. So naturally, I gravitated to that. The whole idea, the genius of the Liberal Party is it isn't a set of totally prescribed values.
Yeah.
And I do believe in the broad church that the best way to have a good idea is to have lots of ideas, as Einstein said, and the best way to improve ideas is to contest them amongst yourselves, to improve on those ideas and weed out the bad ones. And you look at any business or any organisation that's successful, the ability to argue amongst yourself is one of the key ingredients of success. I certainly know that in my business, I had the marketers arguing with the manufacturers, or if we need to make it this way, well, we can't make it that way, not going to sell. That creative tension is what improves things. So I wanted to be in a party that allowed creative tension within its intellectual life and its values life. And so naturally, it would be the vehicle for me. So that's why I chose the Liberal Party. Why did I put my hand up for North East Metro? Well, I think, as we were saying before, I think 2 years prior, I wouldn't have been the right candidate because I didn't know enough about politics. But I think it ultimately came down to just the right mixture of life experience and political experience, and then this other invisible magical thing called timing, where it wasn't my time in McEwen and it wasn't my time in Yan Yan, and people could speculate if it had been a different election, normally I might have won McEwen. If the whole party had a swing against it in the federal election, if it had been a different election where there'd been a swing towards us, maybe that would have tipped me over. So it's just timing. It's not even no one's fault in a way.
Just how the electorate pans out, basically, and how society pans out.
Yeah, where they are at that point in time, and things outside your control. Right? I don't didn't have control over the federal campaign. I had control of what was going on in McEwen. That's all. So in the case of North East Metro, then it's just timing, right? If it had been 6 months later, right, I might have been in and started a business, and I might have been committed to that business, so I wouldn't have been eligible. I wouldn't have been able to put myself forward. So, it was, a part of it was just this magical thing called timing, which seems to come up. I'm noticing seems to come up again in politics.
Mm-hmm. And it's all, I guess, it's all about luck in a sense. That your time came and you ended up being here. So.
Yeah, I think a bit of luck too, because. And I think if you look at any senior leadership position in life in the world, whether you're a CEO, you're aspiring to be a CEO, or you're aspiring to be coach, or you're aspiring to be in parliament, these are very limited number of people get to do this job. So it's always highly competitive. Mm. And when something's highly competitive, sometimes it's just the addition of a load of 1%ers get you over the line. Mm-hmm. So, I had life experience, I had political experience, but these other 1% of timing, luck,
those sort of
the
external factors
the
you can't
external
control.
factors that.
You can't control.
But it does come back to the same thing though, about perseverance, right? In that, and creating your own luck. Because if you keep persevering, you do all the things on a broad front, you do as many things as you can. Well, you get luckier than the person who didn't do all those things. That's true of building a business as it is of any goal you have.
Yeah. I know we've been going on for nearly an hour, Richard, and it's a busy parliamentary day. So we'll move on. We'll move on now quickly to our final question for you. So finally, what's one piece of advice you'd give to students in 2024, especially those who are, it's probably halfway through term one, but those who are starting high school or university?
Yeah, it's probably older students in particular. I think I took too long to find out what I wanted to do in life, and I wish I started everything 10 years earlier than I did. I wish the clock could be moved back 10 years earlier. And this is just my personal advice. It may not apply to everyone, but it's worked for me. The biggest life lesson I came to learn was view your life in 3-year blocks. Understand where you want to be in 3 years. The first year, and make a contract with yourself. In the first year, you're going to work towards that goal, but you're not going to get anything. You're not going to have anything to show for having done it. All the work you do is going to be below the line. But make a contract with yourself that you're going to do it anyway. In the second year of those 3 years, you keep going and you'll start to see the fruits of the labour you did in the first year, and you'll get to a point. And in the third year, that's the payoff. That's the year when you roll to where you originally set out to be. And as you roll towards that goal, you reset the clock and you say, it's now year one of my next 3 years. Nothing in life that is really meaningful or worth achieving takes less than 3 years to do. If you're going to do something substantial in life, it takes 3 years. And once you get that through your brain, you're not going straight to the outcome. You're not going straight to the dream. You'll actually have a much greater chance of getting there. 3 years.
So it's just space it out basically. First year, I guess, trying to establish those sort of goals and what you want to achieve. Second year, maybe more towards, actually progressing and doing those sort of things you want to do to achieve that goal. And third year, I guess, is a little bit more of a reflection of where you've come from and, what sort of stage you're at, and if it's viable to achieve that goal in 3 years, or if you need extra time.
Yeah,
that sort of
and that's if you're aiming for something really substantial.
Yes.
I don't mean I want to buy a car in 3 years. I mean, like, I want to be here in life in 3 years. So everything you do from that point on is a decision.
Yeah.
You're making a choice. Are you going towards that goal, or are you going somewhere else in there?
Yeah, so I guess in that sense, just think of life, I guess, in 3 year blocks, and just try and continuously progress and move forward.
That's my advice.
Some great advice there from Richard, a brilliant entrepreneur. So I think all of you listening to this should, take that advice wholeheartedly and, try and follow it. I know me and Tobias will try and do that sort of thing when we continue with our lives, progress through university and go into the working life. So so those are all our questions for you, Richard. I really do appreciate you coming in actually, but taking the time to have this interview with us. I know we've been speaking for an hour and it's been the whole parliamentary lunch break, so hopefully you do have some more time to get some lunch.
I'll have an apple.
An apple. That should be enough to survive you for the day. But I do really appreciate you coming onto the podcast and speaking to us and talking about your career before politics and some advice you'd give to students.
Thanks, guys. No, thanks for having me on. It's been fun. Thank you.